In 1798, the man who pulled off America's first major bank heist confessed, returned the money, and walked free. The man who didn't do it spent 3 months in prison. This is how that happened. On the night of September 1st, 1798, 2 men walked into the Bank of Pennsylvania and walked out with $162,000 in cash and Spanish gold. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $3 million today. It was the largest bank robbery in American history. It was the first major bank robbery in American history. There was no forced entry. The vault was opened with a key, and within weeks, an innocent blacksmith was arrested, locked in solitary confinement, and nearly killed by yellow fever inside a Philadelphia prison. It's the story of a legal system where the victims of the crime got to choose the suspect, where wealth and family connections decided who walked free, and where one Scottish blacksmith's lawsuit, 7 years later, would help create one of the foundational principles of American civil rights law. In August 1798, a Scottish immigrant named Patrick Lyon was hired to do a simple job. The Bank of Pennsylvania was moving into a new building, Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia. They needed new iron doors for the vault. Lyon was one of the best iron workers in the city. He was given the contract. For weeks, Lyon worked on the vault doors. He fit the locks. He cut the keys. He delivered the finished work to the bank. By the end of August, his job was complete. He had been paid. He was preparing to leave Philadelphia. Then his apprentice fell ill with yellow fever. Philadelphia was in the middle of one of the worst yellow fever outbreaks in American history. Thousands of people had already died. Wealthy families were fleeing the city. Lyon stayed to care for his sick apprentice. By early September, his apprentice was dead. Lyon was preparing to leave for Lewis, Delaware, to escape the fever. On the morning of September 1st, 1798, Lyon was packing to leave the city. At the same hour, 2 men were walking into the Bank of Pennsylvania, opening the vault with a key and removing $162,000. Lyon didn't know it had happened yet. By the time he found out, he would be the prime suspect. The Bank of Pennsylvania was the second largest bank in America. It held federal deposits. It funded government operations. And on the night of September 1st, 1798, it held more than $160,000 in cash, banknotes, and Spanish gold coins inside a vault that had been installed less than a month earlier. The next morning, a bank clerk arrived to open up. The doors were unlocked. The vault was open. The money was gone. There was no broken glass, no damaged doors, no signs of struggle. Whoever had taken the money had used the keys. Within hours, the Bank of Pennsylvania directors had drawn their conclusion. There were only 3 people who could have keys to that vault: the bank's directors, the bank's porter, and the blacksmith who had made the locks. The porter, a man named Thomas Cunningham, had died of yellow fever 5 days earlier. The directors weren't going to suspect themselves. That left Patrick Lyon. But by the time the bank discovered the robbery, Lyon had already left Philadelphia for Lewis, Delaware. The bank directors sent a constable after him. When the constable arrived in Lewis, Lyon was already there. He was not in hiding. He had told friends in Philadelphia where he was going. He had registered at the local inn under his own name. He had no money on him. No large sums of cash, no Spanish gold, no banknotes. The constable arrested him anyway. Lyon was returned to Philadelphia. He was placed in the Walnut Street Jail, the same prison where political prisoners and capital criminals were held. He was put in solitary confinement. He had not been charged. He had not been tried. No evidence had been presented against him beyond the fact that he had built the vault doors. He asked to speak with a lawyer. He was refused. He asked to write letters proving his innocence. He was refused. Outside the jail, Philadelphia was still dying. The yellow fever outbreak was still killing dozens of people every day. The Walnut Street jail had no medical staff. Lyon contracted the fever inside his cell. He nearly died. For 3 months, September, October, November of 1798, Patrick Lyon sat in solitary confinement for a crime he did not commit. He survived the yellow fever. He survived the prison. What he did not have was the ability to prove his innocence to anyone who mattered. The real thief had already confessed. In October of 1798, while Patrick Lyon sat in solitary confinement, a man named Isaac Davis walked into a Philadelphia bank, not the Bank of Pennsylvania, a different one, and deposited a large sum of money. Davis was the son of a wealthy Philadelphia family. He was a member of the social elite. He had connections to the bank's directors. He had no criminal record. And he had just deposited thousands of dollars in cash and Spanish gold over the course of several weeks at multiple banks across the city. One of the banks recognized the notes themselves. They matched the currency stolen from the Bank of Pennsylvania. Davis was arrested, confronted. Within hours, he confessed. Isaac Davis told investigators the truth. He had committed the robbery with the help of Thomas Cunningham, the bank's porter, the same man who had died of yellow fever a few days later. Cunningham had given Davis the keys. They had walked into the bank at night, opened the vault, taken the money, and walked out. There had been no third accomplice. Patrick Lyon had nothing to do with it. Davis returned almost all of the stolen money. $152,000 was recovered. About $9,000 was missing. Davis claimed it had been spent or lost. This is where the story becomes a different kind of crime. The Bank of Pennsylvania did not press charges against Isaac Davis. The directors, many of them his family, friends, or business associates, decided that prosecution would damage the bank's reputation more than letting him go. They petitioned the governor of Pennsylvania for a full pardon. The pardon was granted. Isaac Davis walked free. He paid back what was recovered, paid a small fine, and returned to his social life in Philadelphia. He was never tried. He was never imprisoned. He suffered no consequences beyond a brief public embarrassment. Patrick Lyon was still in solitary confinement. Even after Davis confessed in October, the bank directors refused to release Patrick Lyon. They argued he must have made a duplicate key, that he must have been involved somehow, that a confession from one man did not prove the innocence of another. It took another month and a grand jury that finally rejected the charge against him before Lyon was released. In late November 1798, a Philadelphia judge ordered Patrick Lyon's release. The release came not because the bank directors admitted their mistake, they did not, but because the legal system had finally caught up to the truth Davis had handed them weeks earlier. Lyon walked out of jail in November 1798, 3 months after his arrest. He had been held without charge. He had nearly died of yellow fever. He had lost his apprentice. He had lost his business. He had lost his reputation. He had lost 3 months of his life. The bank directors offered no apology. The constable who arrested him offered no apology. The governor who pardoned Isaac Davis offered no statement about the man who had been wrongly imprisoned in Davis's place. Lyon tried to return to his work as a blacksmith. The bank directors had spread word throughout Philadelphia that he was untrustworthy. Customers stayed away. His business collapsed. He moved to a smaller shop. He took on lower-paying work. For most men, the story would have ended there. A wrongly imprisoned man, his life destroyed, with no legal recourse against the powerful people who had imprisoned him. But Patrick Lyon was not most men. In 1805, 7 years after his release, Patrick Lyon sued the Bank of Pennsylvania for false imprisonment. This was not a small thing in 1805 America. The Bank of Pennsylvania was one of the most powerful institutions in the country. Its directors included some of the wealthiest men in Philadelphia. Lyon was a working-class Scottish immigrant blacksmith. The case had no precedent. False imprisonment lawsuits brought by ordinary citizens against wealthy institutions almost never succeeded. Lyon hired a lawyer named Joseph Reed, a respected Philadelphia attorney. They built a case based on a simple argument. Lyon had been imprisoned for 3 months without charge, without trial, and without evidence. The bank directors had known he was innocent. Isaac Davis's confession in October 1798 had proven it. And they had still kept Lyon in jail for additional weeks while they decided what to do. The trial lasted weeks. The jury heard testimony from bank clerks, the constable, prison officials, and former inmates of the Walnut Street Jail. They heard about the yellow fever Lyon had contracted in solitary confinement. They heard about the months of business he had lost. In 1805, the jury delivered its verdict. Patrick Lyon had won. He was awarded $12,000 in damages, an enormous sum in 1805, equivalent to roughly $300,000 today. The Bank of Pennsylvania appealed. The verdict was upheld. The bank paid. But the money was not the point. The Lyon verdict became one of the most discussed legal cases in early American history. Newspapers across the new United States reported on it. Lyon's lawsuit was cited in legal arguments for decades afterward. It was used as precedent in the development of American civil liberties law. The principle established by Lyon's case was simple. A citizen could not be imprisoned without charge, without trial, and without evidence. And if they were, they could sue the institution that imprisoned them, and they could win. Wealth and family connections could not protect powerful people from accountability when they used the legal system to silence the innocent. This was not a new idea. The Constitution had guaranteed due process for 15 years by 1805. But Lyon's case was one of the first major civil verdicts that put real money behind it. It proved that the courts would enforce the principle, even against powerful banks, even on behalf of working-class plaintiffs. Lyon wrote a memoir about his imprisonment in 1799, a short book describing his 3 months in solitary confinement. The book became a bestseller in early America. It was reprinted multiple times. It is still studied today by historians of American civil rights law. In 1826, an artist named John Neagle painted Lyon's portrait. The painting, Pat Lyon at the Forge, is now one of the most famous early American portraits. It hangs today in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. The painting shows Lyon as a working-class hero, a blacksmith standing at his forge, a man who survived false imprisonment, sued the institution that imprisoned him, and won. Isaac Davis, the man who actually committed the robbery, died in 1799, less than a year after his pardon. The cause of death is uncertain. Some sources say yellow fever, some say tuberculosis. He died with his social reputation mostly intact and his criminal record erased. The man who confessed walked free. The man who didn't do it became a symbol of justice. The system that imprisoned the wrong man was forced, 7 years later, to pay for it. The 1798 Bank of Pennsylvania robbery teaches us something most early American history misses. The story isn't the heist. The story is what happened afterward. The way the legal system bent itself around protecting a wealthy thief and punishing an innocent blacksmith, until that blacksmith refused to let the case end there. Isaac Davis got away with the robbery in every meaningful sense. He kept his freedom. He kept his family name. He died less than a year later, but with his name and his freedom intact. Because Patrick Lyon survived prison, survived yellow fever, and survived 7 years of legal battle. The next innocent man in America had a precedent to point to. If you read the early case law on false imprisonment in the United States, Lyon's name shows up again and again. A Scottish blacksmith who was wrongly arrested in 1798 became one of the foundational citations in American civil liberties law. He never set out to become that. He just refused to accept that the system could destroy him and walk away. The Bank of Pennsylvania robbery isn't a story about who stole the money. It's a story about who paid the price. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe to Unraveled Media. We unravel the world's boldest crimes, cons, and loopholes.